Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Insightful Accountants Future Forward Summit. Tried and true plus some new profitable accounting niches. I am Gary Dehart, the host of the Future Forward Summit, Accounting Insiders podcast and publisher of Insightful Accounting and Tax Practice News. Each of our panelists today has a niche they focus on and we'll be speaking about. Kristen Nies Ciraldo focuses on the restaurant field, Kelly Gonsalves on e-commerce, Diane Gilson, construction, and Gregg Bossen on nonprofit. Some say he's the king of nonprofit, but it might have been Greg that said that. I'm not sure.
Probably.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of housekeeping items for today. CPE is available, and just like all CPE stuff, if you need the CPE, you have to be here for 50 minutes, 50 minutes. You have to respond to 3 of the poll questions. I think we only have 3, so don't miss any. So if you have any questions, we want you to put them down into the questions panel. The chat panel is disabled, so put them in the questions panel. If we have time at the end, we will get to them. And we'll also try to monitor it so we can, if you have questions, we can get them answered in a timely manner. The link to the recording of this will be sent to you, and it can also be found on our YouTube channel. I'll drop that link into the chat for you to download. And like I said, that will be sent out afterwards. The CPE certificates, if you qualify, they will be generated most likely tonight, but give us 24 hours. If you don't see it in 24 hours and you think you qualified, just shoot us an email and we'll get that sent out to you. One other thing, we have engaged the closed captions because we have had a couple of people in the past request that. So if you need closed captioning, you go down to somewhere in your toolbar, you'll find 3 buttons. If you hit that 3 buttons, then you can enable closed captioning. So thanks for that feedback that we've received. Sorry, it's taken us a little while to get that done, but we have it now. And I'm going to turn this over to Kristen, who is going to be leading this discussion with our rockstar panelists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. I was on mute, so already off to a great start. I am so excited today to be talking to Diane, Greg, and Kelly about their niches, because I also concentrate in a niche, and I love talking to people about their experiences, what they find best and worst about their niche and just niching in general, and what steps, recommendations they'd give to other people about choosing a niche or maybe working with the particular niche that they're working with. And I'm sorry for all our Canadian friends or anyone else who says niche. I just like niche, sorry. So the title of the session is Tried and True plus some new. We've got profitable accounting niches, construction, e-commerce, and nonprofit. And joining me today is, let's go first to Diane. Diane, I'm going to share this, my screen, because she has a wealth of information on her slide. It's crazy. Diane, can you give us a quick rundown of how you have come to be such an expert in the construction niche?
Okay, well, yeah, after leaving the CPA world, I was in banking for 13 years and headed up the management accounting department at my regional bank, and we did a lot of product costing. And when I decided to start my company, I think it was the second day I was in business. I was out at a networking group because, you know, when you're starting out, you want to get out and network with everybody. And I mentioned that I had started my accounting firm, and one of the ladies in the group said, you know what, you got to go over to the Home Builders Association, because my husband's a builder and I'm an accountant, so I help him, but boy, all those guys out there, all the rest of them need a lot of help. And so I said, okay, I'll go check it out, and joined that day and went to their tabletop that night and got a chance to start meeting people in the construction industry, and found I just really loved working with folks in that industry for a whole variety of reasons that we might want to talk about a little bit later.
Yeah. That story sounds very familiar to me. And it says here you've been working with this niche for 25 plus years, which is amazing. So we're really looking forward to digging into some of those gems I'm sure you have, not just about construction, but about approaching a niche in general.
Sure.
Greg,
Yes. All right.
let's go to you. Now tell me, is it Bossen or Bossen?
It's Bossen.
Bossen.
Bossen,
Okay. I'm
yeah.
glad I asked. I would have been Bossening you up the whole time.
That's okay. That is okay.
So
And
you are an expert, self-declared king of nonprofits.
yeah,
Am I correct?
supposedly. So the niche
Okay.
it picked me. When I graduated college and I went to work for Pete Marwick, and this was in 1988. And it was KPMG. Pete Marwick had just bought KPMG. And anyway, they had this the manager who assigned new staff to different audits had a giant board. They didn't do it on Excel. And they had the rows were the names of all the new staff and the columns were the jobs. And so it was completely happenstance that the very first audit I was on was a nonprofit audit. And so the manager liked me. And that's the only reason why I ended up with this niche, is because that was my very first audit. I ended up doing more audits. And then when I left KPMG to be on my own, that was what I knew. So that's what I went with. So that's my story.
Awesome. Well, you have such a wealth of experience too. I see you're an author, QuickBooks Made Easy for Nonprofits. Can't ask for more than that. I know Diane too has all kinds of just information for people in the niche, and certainly I'm looking to you guys for inspiration in that area for sure. Kelly Gonsalves, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Long time no see.
I know. So for those that don't know, Kristen and I work together pretty much every day. But wow. Okay. So I'm feeling like, I mean, I'm kind of a newbie, but now I'm feeling like a super newbie because the three of you guys have been doing this for longer than I have and have like so much experience.
Okay,
so
but can I just interrupt you for just 1 second? And I wouldn't do this with anyone but you. I'm going to challenge you on that because you can't have been in e-commerce for 25 years because the e-commerce is kind of new.
fair. Okay. I'll
So
take that.
maybe relatively you're in it for longer than most.
That's fine by me.
Okay. Yeah.
So I started my business 7 years ago and shortly after wound up, and I say wound up because I was actively trying to avoid going into a niche at all. And I say niche, and comments in the chat would say otherwise. So I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody with my niche situation. But I was actively trying to avoid choosing a niche. I was like, I'm going to be a generalist. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to work with all the clients. It's going to be great. And the demand for e-commerce became more and more pressing. And so I decided to take a different approach and fully embrace it. And then went more deep dive and started looking at what technology I would need and how to handle stuff like sales tax and different marketplaces, because there are so many. And so, yeah, so I've been doing it for probably about 3 or 4 years now that I've been working in e-commerce. And in addition to, I still have some general clients, so to speak, but e-commerce is my favorite.
And let me just say, Kelly also has a lot of experience on the other side of e-commerce. So not only does she get to serve e-commerce clients, she's like, it's like the hair club for men. I'm dating myself, but like, she's also a client. Like she uses the actual like products as well, gets to test them out with real data, et cetera, et cetera. So she's kind of in charge of that part of our business, and she does an amazing job and gets to vet all the things. I'm going to throw it to, because I skipped the first polling question. We'd like to know what your current niche situation is out there in the listening audience.
By
Never
the
had
way,
one, never will. niche curious, on the fence about keeping the niche you have now, or you have a niche and you love it?
George, by the way, Kristen says that
Yeah.
you are saying it correctly. All right.
Oh,
So
great.
George says you're saying it correctly.
Well,
And then hello to Murph, by the way. Murph is
Yes,
here.
hi, Murph.
Yeah, which is great. So anyway.
He prefers niche. That's where he wrote niche all the way out. So niche, niche, niche.
And we have
That's how Murph would
47,
say it.
we have 47 people on this. So hello to
Yeah.
Albert and Alexandra and April and Beth. Bob's here.
I really feel like it's like romper room, again, dating myself, romper room with the
Yeah.
magic mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see Murph and everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna leave this poll up for a couple more seconds, or did everyone answer?
This is a Gary thing.
Gary, give people maybe another 10 seconds.
Yeah, we're going to close it out. So
Okay,
almost everybody's in. So here we go.
I'm curious about this one. Ooh.
Nice.
Ooh. Well, I'm glad we have at least a third of our audience is niche curious, because I feel like the people on this panel will really be able to give you some valuable information. They are not, having a niche isn't for everyone. However, if you are thinking about it, these people will tell you the real straight talk on it. And
It also doesn't have to be an industry. I know that we tend to default to
yes.
Construction, nonprofits, e-commerce, restaurants. Some people do, religious organizations. Like, there's different ways of going about it. But I found that some people will work with a certain size of a business, and that's all they'll do, or a certain type of a business. Only startups, which could be a number of different businesses. There's different ways to kind of specialize into a niche. I'm going to say it every different way because I feel like I say it differently every time. There's different ways to specialize into it. It doesn't always have to be around, see, someone just said micro business. It doesn't always have to be around the industry type.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how often, right, that our description of our niche sort of hides what we're really specializing in. Like, it's easier for me to just say, I specialize in restaurants, when really I specialize in independent restaurants where the owner is like a hot mess and likes to open all the businesses, including restaurants and bars, and doesn't know what they're doing and needs a right hand. That's not a good explanation, but that's who I tend to work with. And so I wonder, like, having a certain app, having a certain specialty in terms of reporting, all those things. Diane, have you come across situations where you've had to maybe say no thank you to someone who is technically in your stated niche just because they didn't fit in with your processes?
Oh,
in a
yeah.
different way?
We always have an onboarding process where we go through and interact with people and, find out a whole variety of things about them to see if we think it would be a good fit. So we end up focusing on certain size of business because we find that they're going to be a better fit to work with us. Generally, we're in the residential area. Once in a while, I'll pick up somebody that does some light construction. But typically they're residential. And the other thing that's interesting is you think of construction as a really, oh gosh, that's really focused. In fact, there are all sorts of different types of construction companies out there, and the owners of those different kinds of construction businesses are very different in nature. So somebody that's doing developments, is going to be a different personality type than a remodeler. And somebody who's a handyman type person is going to be a different personality type because they serve different clientele. And so it's very interesting to realize that there are all of these niches inside of niches, and then deciding which of those personality types that you work best with.
Well, that's what I found so interesting about the little bit you did say about how you came to work with construction. It wasn't necessarily about the construction first. It was more just being able to get along with those personalities that you were finding that were in that industry, or just being able to serve that industry well in terms of personably.
Sure.
Have you found that, Greg, as well, and Kelly?
Well, I was just going to add a couple of quick things about the niche within the niche. So 2 examples. One, I do audits. I only do audits of nonprofits, but if you get more than $750,000 of federal money, or actually expend more in a particular year, then you have to have a special type of audit, which is a single audit. It's a governmental audit. It's a real pain in the butt. I don't do that. Okay. I will not do that. All right. So now I've partnered with somebody to do it. But anyway, and then the other, which is something that I wanted to talk about later. I have a session at 1 o'clock where I'm going to go through all these ways to expand a niche practice. But so I don't want to repeat the same things over and over again, but that I'm going to say there. But that was one example. And then the other example, I can't remember now. So I'll move on to somebody else then.
Kelly, do you find you have a sub niche in your e-commerce niche?
Maybe. So, I mean, there are so many different marketplaces and payment types and payment processors and different ways that you can do e-commerce now. I tend to, I would say, gravitate towards the ones that I know, right? But I don't necessarily turn down the others. So if it's something that is, let's say, new technology or something that's up and coming, sometimes it will pique my interest. And so I want to learn more about it or how to handle it, either for possibly future clients, or maybe it's somebody that I really want to work with and help them figure it out. I do tend to stay away from brick and mortar. So like, let's say a store that has a POS system, and then now they're also selling online. And so making it a little more complicated with inventory and stuff like that. I do tend to shy away from those, but I don't know if there's necessarily, and maybe because it's still kind of newish, I don't know if there's necessarily like a clear breakdown of the different parts of e-commerce that you would handle.
Are you working a lot with people that are starting out?
Yes. So a lot of people will start out selling on something like Etsy, where it's a little bit smaller and handled for them. And then they kind of branch out into, let's say, larger marketplaces and stuff like that. And so helping them kind of transition and pull everything over is something that I've been good about. So I guess maybe it's the smaller guys, even though now you can do a volume or, really good sales and not have a lot going on, let's say, with technology and back end. So yeah, I guess they could still be just starting out, but making, bringing in a lot of money and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. You can make a lot of money and still be very simple, very new, depending on how specialized even the retailer is. Right. So that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Greg has his hand up.
Oh yeah.
Let me come back again. So the other thing that I remembered was a niche within a niche of the nonprofits industry is churches. And the way that I handled that was I did not get rid of churches. I found a partner. Her name is Barbara Starley. She does nothing but churches. And so basically I partnered with her. And so I don't necessarily do all of the work, but I do the marketing and we split the revenue. And Murph brings up a thing. He's like, that's a good point. These pain in the butt clients, he's kind of referring to like the single audit, which would be a pain in the butt. This was an existing client that I do an audit for every year. All of a sudden they needed a single audit. Did I fire them? No. Did I pass them off? No. I found a contractor who specializes in that space. And then I subcontracted the work out to them. So I didn't get rid of the client altogether.
I love that. So you're not getting rid of all that history, all that knowledge that you know about. And let's face it, if you're doing well by your clients, they are going to grow. They are going to go past that, hopefully, that point and need that other kind of audit, I'm assuming.
Well, and if you're doing individual tax returns, they get old, their parents die, and then they need an estate return.
Yeah.
So.
Don't lose the history. It's hard won.
And A dentist wants you to define e-commerce, Kelly.
Oh,
Yes. So it's kind of funny. We did a webinar last year called Everything is E-commerce because it has grown to be so widespread. So the typical definition is selling online, right? Just having, let's say, a store online, we're going to go with Etsy or Shopify, something along those lines is what typically comes to mind when someone says e-commerce. But it has expanded out. So it could be that you are taking payment for something on your website. Let's say it's not a physical product. So now we're looking at Stripe and Square and all of the different credit card processors and payment processors that are out there. Part of bringing e-commerce into the accounting space, like bringing it into the accounting software, is then connecting it in and having it parse out stuff like fees or sales tax or whatever information has to go in. Maybe you're pulling from inventory somewhere. And so now that ecosystem of what's involved has grown. It definitely started out by online selling, selling on Amazon, selling on Shopify, but it has now changed to this hybrid situation where you may not use any of that, but you're still taking payment somewhere, or you're still having to connect something to your accounting software. And so that's the e-commerce side of accounting, I would say. And Kristen, you also helped me, like we have that Etsy store together. So if you have an opinion, please share.
You take care of all the things. Yeah, I mean, it's much more complicated. You don't realize how much you don't know until you have an actual store with actual products. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I don't know how much I sold unless I go on Etsy. There's a lot of, I can't imagine having more than one place. Like we've said before, there's really only one place you can find out your total sales anymore, because if you're using more than one platform, which most people are.
Right.
And I think to some extent that's probably true for other niches as well, that QuickBooks or Xero or whatever sort of GL becomes that source of truth in terms of incomes from all different kinds of places. So I have a question for our audience. If you could do question 2, if you had to, now that you've kind of gotten the quick and dirty sort of rundown on these niches, what would you choose if you have? And if you would rather quit accounting than do one of these, then just choose other. And hopefully we can change your mind by the end. I find so interesting is each one of you has described your niche in a way that makes it really obvious that you can turn any niche into any kind of tailored focus that you need, the kind of business you want to run. Would you say that's right, Diane?
Absolutely. Yep. You have to pick and choose a variety of things. Initially, when I thought I was going to focus on one niche, it felt, it felt like I was closing the door, but in fact, it was opening up a whole lot of different aspects. And once you choose to focus, there are a lot of, it's like opening another set of 8 or 10 doors, and then you choose again, and you keep choosing as you keep moving forward.
So almost like your vocabulary in that world sort of expands, you become more fluent in that world. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yep, that's true. But as you continue to learn more, when you start, we use the phrase lots of times with clients, they don't know what they don't know. Well, when you choose a niche, you get into something and you just don't know what you don't know until you start working in it. And then as you interact with people as your clients and so on, you find out more about what they want, what they need. And so you learn and grow with them. So if you're going out to conferences and talking to people, you learn a lot in the process. I'm learning something on a regular basis. I don't think there's a week that goes by that I'm not learning something new from a client. So
yeah, and all the industries, and even if not the industries, like Kelly said, the ways people are taking payments, the ways people are communicating are changing. if the industry itself isn't changing out from underneath you, the technology is sure to. So nonprofits in construction, very popular.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all right,
Well,
Kelly. We'll
we're gonna
conquer
go
the
with
world
people
together.
don't know what they don't know. I promise.
They don't know what they
E-commerce is
don't know.
fun.
It's new. It's really new.
Nancy in the chat, hi Nancy, had mentioned that her niche is HOAs, property managers, and landlords. So I feel like that's even like more
amazing.
drilled down.
Like that's a very specific kind of real estate
Right.
thing. Oh,
One
wow.
thing
Even
I-
that
one-
real estate, you could be on a whole bunch of different sides of that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've thought about is like Nancy, she's HOA, property manager, and landlords. It might be like, you know, the accounting's not that different. It's not that hard. You know, does this really even need to be a niche? It's as much of a niche for marketing purposes as it is for the content, because if you are an HOA or a property manager and you find an accountant online that specializes in HOAs and property managers, I mean, you're going to go to them first. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
And you're
Yeah,
going to
and-
expect that they probably cost more because they're specialists.
Working with different technology partners also helps. So I specialize in certain tools. And so people find me by way of using that tool, let's say, you know, having someone that specializes in like an e-commerce connector like Cinder, or even QuickBooks, obviously, right? So someone that's specializing in specific technology also pulls in customers that are needing something along those lines and they're not really sure how to use it.
That's such a great point, because often you're, as a person in an industry, you're out there looking, trying to solve a problem on your own first, and maybe you find something, or in my case, you know, all my clients practically have POS systems. They typically buy those before they get a bookkeeper and accountant.
Right.
And so they may be using that. Well, we need a bookkeeper and accountant, but who uses Toast? Who knows how to work with Toast, or who knows how to work with Clover? It might be the technology that comes first, and that might be what they're married to most. So that's a really good.
That can also be
like,
the deciding factor of not working with them.
Right.
So, I
don't want that.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
someone last year that was using primarily Venmo to take payments, and there's no way that I would ever go through that process again. It was quite awful, but now I know I don't want to work with anyone that's taking Venmo as payments. So it helps you kind of, I think, narrow your focus on what it is that you want to work on and how you want to work.
And so, Greg, if you're narrowing focus, and like this thing up here now says the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? What do you think, what's your best piece of advice, your most urgent caveat, and the biggest why that someone would serve nonprofits? And just keeping in mind, right, that idea that you're not just serving nonprofits, you're also even narrower than that. You've chosen to even go further. What's the reason for that? Is it to avoid some of these good, bad, and ugly sort of rabbit trails, or whatever they're called?
Well, and again, I've got this session that I'm doing today where I'm going to get into the gory details, but in general, and Kelly, I think, already touched on it, but it has to do with focusing. You know, it helps me know who I'm going to market to and how I'm going to market to them. If I'm a generalist, you know, then that becomes much more challenging. And then plus I'm automatically an expert because, you know, I'm in the particular space. So it makes it easier. And why nonprofits is difficult, I do want to say what's so difficult about that niche. And it's because there are so many different stakeholders that are asking for reporting. And you don't have just one person who only cares about taxes. You have people that are on the board of directors that a lot of them don't know anything about accounting. So you're trying to make reports that are easy. There's always one or two board members that came from corporate, and they want to know ROI, and they want to know all this fancy stuff, and they want all these fancy reports that nobody else understands except them, and then they don't even show up to the board meeting. And making those people happy is annoying. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really difficult.
And they change all the time too. I'm going to jump in because I did nonprofits. But the board members change just about the time you get everybody calmed down and settled in and understanding what's going on, then they change and they got to start all over again.
In your construction niche, are you sort of insulated a little bit? Like, let's call them tourists. That's what I call them in my industry. The people who thought it would be nice and fun to own a restaurant, and they own something else, and they don't understand why restaurants don't work like movie sets, which is my favorite. I try and avoid those kinds of partnership situations. Gregg, it sounds like that's just a condition of nonprofits, and it is what it is. Diane, do you have sort of a buffer if you work with a construction company, or are you also getting those sort of first builder people that are all up in the details, wanting everything a certain way?
Well, I've learned to listen to what my construction owners may be asking for. Okay. And lots of times we can give it to them by, customizing things. If you've got the good underlying structure and you're using, and we stick with desktop at this time. If you have a good underlying structure, you can slice and dice the information in a lot of different ways for them. So I try to hear what they want. But the one thing I learned, and it's interesting because Murph asked about the PETA clients. When I first started working with people in construction, that's what they really felt like. And I was working with smaller ones. And so, kind of the bad thing about the construction industry when they're small and they're getting started out, the thought of, paying more than $35 an hour to somebody, because that's where their mindset is lots of times when they're just getting started out, they just can't handle it. They don't have the financing to take care of it, but just conceptually they have a very difficult time with it. So the way we work around that now is I have like 90 online training classes, and we suggest that people go, say, oh, here's online training for you, and that's something you can afford. And that's an option. That's a menu option for them. And then I work, if I'm going to work one-to-one with people, then generally they're in the, $1 to $10 million gross revenue range. And once people are in that area, they've been in business for a while, they have more of a business mindset. They understand the value. Okay. Whereas startups don't really understand the value of good numbers. They're just looking at their checkbook
until
balance.
They need funding.
Right.
Pardon?
Until they need funding, and then all of a sudden they're all about their numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that you both, you and Gregg, have this sort of, you're basically creating your ideal clients, right? By sort of outsourcing the time you would spend one-on-one into these products you've created. So by the time people come to you, you're not spending time on those basics, hopefully, fingers crossed. That's such an interesting take. And I would think that approach is probably something that can really only be done when you're dealing with niches, because at some point you've got to sort of focus in. It's got to be applicable and relevant to who is picking up your book or taking the class. But I love that. I love that you have that menu option, because many times as soon as people start to take the class, they're like, no, I need someone else to do this for me right away. Stat.
Yeah. Well, and I just, one thing about that, it's great if you can do training, but not everybody is interested or has the ability to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the piece about it is you're basically it's a finite service that you're providing, even though they're just going and watching a video. Hopefully they're paying for it. So it's a tiny kind of an a la carte service that you're offering that can be done with other services, not just training. And that's one of the things. Feels like I keep doing a promo for my session later, but we're going to get into
I
details.
love it. That's good.
We're going to get into details because we're providing a la carte services as a way of getting a client in the door. and then turning them into something more if we want them, or sending them away if we don't.
Well, one thing I really loved about what you said, and I've realized it in my niche as well, I'll get the same question over and over again, and I'll be like, well, I don't do that. And then finally, I just stopped because I don't have good boundaries. Like, I can't say no to people. So I just included it in my service. I love that you outsource, like, I cannot do this report. This person over here is going to do it. Kelly, are you at that point where you are sort of funneling people off into the things that you're best at?
Yeah, I think so. So I think when I get on a call with somebody, I kind of like, the first thing we go over is obviously what they do, and I always ask about them. And there can be different tells in what they're describing where I'm like, oh, this is so not my jam. But I tend to, and kind of like Greg said, I tend to listen to them, I hear them out. And then thankfully our industry is widespread, right? Like, we have a lot of, just even on this webinar, there's so many people niching in different areas that I can almost always refer them to a person that knows, that thing or does that thing or whatever that looks like, right? So I think that I'm lucky that I get to keep the ones that I do like to work with that are within my, parameters. And then I don't have to leave them hanging. I can usually always find them somebody that's going to do the other things that, let's say, I don't handle, or I don't have someone, on my team that handles it. So yeah, I think there's different ways to go about it, and making friends in different industries, but even within the same niche makes total sense. Having people that you can, push either, the overflow to, or like I said, just someone that does something slightly different than you. Because then also, let's say I eventually do want to take on that thing, I can learn from that person as well.
I love that, that you're sort of highlighting that, because I think there is a misunderstanding for people that maybe aren't focused in a niche, and maybe there's a sense that there is more competition there. Maybe people understand, oh, I'll take care of all the restaurants, or I'll take care of all the e-commerce or construction and nonprofits. What they don't realize is that there's so much collaboration, like Greg said. Diane, you alluded to it too, and Kelly, obviously, between people in the same niche, there's so much that you can just become more and more specialized, which not only means, Greg, that you're better at marketing, but also better what's going to walk through the door. You're better prepared, fingers crossed that they've responded to actual marketing and read your, specialization before they've called, but assuming that they have, you know what to expect. What would you guys say? So I'm hearing all the positive things. What would you guys say is the biggest bummer? If not about your niche, then just niching in general.
I think changing over to a niche was probably one of the more difficult things. So when you're filtering out, let's say you have like a bunch of general clients, and now you're like, I really like this thing, I want to focus on this one area. Linda Arnasani actually spoke about it a lot when she switched to law firms, another niche. And she was saying how, you have all these leads coming in from all over the place, and you're kind of just going and going and going. And then you switch to this niche and you're like, okay, no, I can't take you. I can't take you. I can't take you. And it kind of feels like you turned off the phone lines. Like, you're like, oh, it's so quiet now. But as you switch over and you start to specialize, then you're getting the right type of leads coming in, and you're working with the people that you want to move forward into that niche. So I think the first bummer, so to speak, is doing that switch, and then kind of that feeling of, is this gonna work? Is this the right thing? Am I being too hasty? Should I go back to just taking everybody that comes in the door? Because it can be a little scary.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree with that, Diane and Greg? Is that what you would call the biggest hurdle, or the biggest?
I would for sure. It's scary. It's totally scary. And you get somebody that's like, like I have on my website, it says, because I do a couple of restaurants, it says that I specialize in bars and restaurants. So like I have my web guy kind of redo the site so it's at least not in the 1980s anymore. And about once every couple of weeks, I get a call from a restaurant. And I'm like, restaurants are so easy. It's like, like, I mean, well, I mean,
for me, but
they got a lot
I've
of
not
cash.
heard that from other people.
Well, it depends, but anyway, for me, and they pay well, and it's just like,
Yeah.
And I'm like, but actually bars, and but I'm like, no. But if I was switching and I didn't have a lot of money in the space, in my nonprofit space, it'd be scary as heck. But ultimately the payoff is much better. It's just like anything in your life, it's a change. It's a shift. A change is scary, and you're going, let's be honest, it's money you need coming in the door during that time. So that may be a little rough for a minute.
Diane, did you have that experience when you first started too, or were you sort of in an embarrassment of riches situation, and was the complication different?
Well, I knew before I started my company, I knew that it would be smart to niche, okay, because the accounting field is so vast. I mean, how are you going to know everything you need to know about every kind of client that can come through the door? So I had the desire to niche, but I had to pay bills, I had to pay the rent and people working with me and so on. So I took a variety of clients, and it took, although I initially found that I loved working with construction clients, I took on bookkeeping. We did some payroll. Won't go there. For people, we did taxes for about 3 years until I finally went, no more of that. Because I'd come out of public accounting, and there were just some things I felt I had to do to keep the doors open. But as I had different experiences with different clients, I started learning which people I really enjoyed working with, and that I really wanted to work with people I really liked working with, and found that I had a few clients that I really didn't enjoy working with at all, and that they represented certain industries. Okay, so doctors. And then, so at any rate, I said, oh, okay, not going to work. So it's kind of a combination of what you're drawn to and what you're, repelled from. And so I believe that I was probably about 2.5 years in before I said, I'm going to go out there and say I'm working with construction. And because I'd also gone out to some conferences, and when I would talk to people at a conference, in some cases I might go, okay, well, I work in accounting, and people go, oh, okay, fine. But if I said I work with, I'm in accounting and I work with construction clients, and they go, really? You really work with construction clients? I mean, that they just warmed up immediately, because they were used to working with generalists who didn't understand what they were doing, or what they needed. So
that is so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we get to our third polling question.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
we've just been chatting. And I also want to make sure that we get to your information slides. Obviously, people can, I believe, Gary, if I'm not mistaken, people will get copies of the slides. There is a slide from each of our panelists about the things, just some take on their industry or their journey to having a niche. But for now, what is your opinion on the biggest win from having a niche? It keeps complications in check. It allows for better pricing. Both of the above are great, or I'm not convinced it's for me. Or something else that I didn't think
will
of.
say, I think that, and I think that Diane, because she just said it, and Greg would probably agree, in the very beginning, so for someone that's first starting out, it's difficult to go straight into a niche unless you maybe came from a background in, like Kristen said, she worked in restaurants and bars and that was her jam, and so she kind of moved into that space. But when you're first starting, I kind of tell everyone to take on a bunch of different clients and then figure out which one you enjoy the most, which one you want to really deep dive into, which one you want to learn more about and work with on a regular basis. So
Even
I
I did
think in the
that.
beginning, it can be a little bit of chaos, but then when you find that thing, it makes sense for, better pricing, more streamlined, less complication, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
And even if
Both of you
you
guys.
did come up in a certain industry, that's not a guarantee that you'll know how to go. I knew all about the restaurants. I knew nothing about marketing to restaurants.
Right.
Now I just don't. I market to accountants. They just give me their restaurants that call them. So it takes a while. It took me a long time to sort of realize that they were too busy to be looking at any kind of advertising I would be doing. But who wasn't busy was the busy accountants who didn't want to deal with their restaurant clients anymore. And I'm assuming that Greg and Diane, you get a lot of referrals from other accountants as much as you do primary sources.
I get
Mhm.
referrals, not from sometimes from accountants, but I don't really talk to accountants that much. I find accountants
either.
kind of boring. So I don't really,
Okay.
even though I'm
Well,
an
that's all the
accountant.
time
Very
we
nice.
have. I'm sorry, Greg, you seem to have malfunctioned.
Yeah, I think that was. But
What do I expect
Whole
from people that
All
say
of
niche?
people in the industry.
All people that say niche. No, I understand. You're in your world. You're in that world.
I don't hang out with accountants, but yeah, no, it's definitely true, because if you can send work that you don't do to other accounts, they'll send work to you.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what you wanted me to say. So, but that's true.
Yes. I wanted you to agree with me. I'm glad we came to that meeting of the minds. So this is Diane's great slide she gave there. She has just please go to her website. She has great content, great resources there, not only for accountants, but more importantly, sometimes for the clients of accountants who maybe don't have time to tell them all the things about their own industry. But here are just a couple of things, a couple of details about construction that she's shared. Greg's given us just some stats, like why this is a niche that is ripe for people to come in and be of service to the people who are being of service. And oh, bonus, don't have to worry so much about taxes. I love that. Just make sure that and I'll say this, we actually have a t-shirt that says this, be a for-profit, nonprofit accountant or bookkeeper. Just because you're working for nonprofits doesn't mean you shouldn't make one. That's just a tip. I spent a lot of time not making good money for just that reason. And Kelly has shared with us just how she went from not knowing where to start and just inching along, and using the opportunities and the feedback she was getting from clients and from her own experiences to help her narrow down in an organic way and in a way that served her business.
Melissa just said something that I wanted to
Yeah.
share. So Melissa in the chat said, another reason to niche is the nice confidence booster when you're working the space that you know really well. She said, who doesn't need a confidence booster once in a while? And I have to agree. When you're speaking to somebody and you really know the thing that you're talking about, it's a world of difference from something you're feeling uncomfortable about or uncertain about.
That is so true. You know what? Thank you, Melissa, because that honestly, that's the reason why I've always returned to restaurants. It's my first language. Accounting's my second language. For a lot of people, especially bookkeepers, they were in an industry first and became the accountant or the bookkeeper because of their knowledge of a business and good at math and puzzles. Sometimes that happens. And so being able to stay close to what you know so well it's such a benefit.
I specialized in shopping online first, and then I decided to, really embrace that.
Yeah,
there wasn't really a way to go about that first. So yeah, I'm really good at shopping online.
I wrote the same thing down when you were talking, because she had given us these questions ahead of time. And so what are 3 benefits? And the top one I said was, it's very fulfilling to really know something well. It is. Feels good.
Yeah.
And man, if you can use some of those little terms that they know in their industry, when you're talking to them, they get all excited. All
So
excited.
true. I saw,
Yeah.
Diane, on your website, there's all these terms. I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. It's delightful because I don't know anything about construction, and clearly you do. And I'm not the audience for that site,
Well, and if you can, it's taken me a long time to learn kind of all the parallels, but if I can explain an accounting system and say, the chart of accounts, it's a lot like when you're building something, that's the foundation. And the item list, okay, that's kind of like the framing. And and then when I say, and other people say, well, can I just do this and so? And I said, well, that's kind of like trying to build a house by starting with the drywall.
Yeah.
And, if you can find ways to create parallels in their mind, a framework for them to think about the accounting and using their lingo. I mean, I would never even think about remodeling my own kitchen. Okay.
Right.
So I even use that parallel with people and say, what I don't know about the actual process, but I do know the phases and the way all the numbers need to fit together. And so to me, it's been a very handy framework that I can use to start explaining some of the counting concepts and some of the results, and the outcome of having a good system is a lot like
That's really smart.
doing a remodeling
That is
job,
really
or
smart.
it's like building a new house. So
I what I love about that, and I've never actually made this connection until both you and Greg were sort of talking about really connecting with clients. I wonder, there's so much talk about advisory, and we all need to learn how to do advisory and all the things. And really, it just seems like you guys have sort of honed in on this communication and really connecting with what your clients are doing, what their experience is in their world. You're totally in their world. And what better position to be in to just give advice that isn't necessarily a big production. It's just, what they're going through because it's your specialty. And it's just as simple as that. And so I love that you're, connecting with your clients where they are, rather than requiring sort of a whole second language for them to.
I think that's like the number one
communicate.
complaint about accountants from small business owners is when we speak at them in accounting language and they're like, like what? So I think that's actually really impressive, Diane. Being able to compare it to the stuff that they know makes total sense.
Now I have to go find some metaphors. That's going to be my Christmas project.
We have Kathy, and who's on today, Kathy Grosskirth. She actually specializes in accountants. So her niche is training bookkeepers and accountants, which I think is awesome. And Angela just said that going deep into a niche that's really what advisory is. And I have to agree, especially from the way that Diane just described it. Genius.
Yeah. So speaking of learning new languages and all the things, our last polling question, I want to make sure we get it in there before I let all these people give some last gems. Would you be interested in a deeper dive on any of these niches? Or obviously, if there's a niche you'd be interested in a deeper dive on that is not represented here today, because obviously there's a million niches, feel free to shoot an email directly to Gary, because, why not? But of these niches, if there's any in particular that you're interested in hearing more about, we'd love to know. And if this webinar has clarified for you that maybe you're a generalist and this kind of isn't for you, you're going to specialize in a process more than a people, that's great too. That's the point, to just get some clarity. So any last gems from y'all?
Sorry, let me throw in a question here, Kristen, just while thanks. So we've talked about, specialization. We've talked about, making money. We've talked about learning and education. So have any of you been able, this is kind of a two-part question. Have any of you been able to get support from the vendors to learn the niche? And have you taken that, your your master skill set, and then also gone back to the vendor to help them work on product and make money from that as well.
Oh, interesting.
I have, for
I
sure.
have.
Yeah. And the vendors, so vendors, and this is, I'm going to be going into this more, but you know, it really comes down to apps, right? I know you're in the e-commerce space, so you've probably been dealing with Shopify and WooCommerce and stuff. And yeah, you know, I've gone to the vendors for like my CRMs for the donor databases that sync with QuickBooks, and you know, join them, you know, become an affiliate member, then go back to them. I actually went back to one of them, a little green light, and I said, listen, you need to sync with QuickBooks, and I can help you do that, you know. And so I ended up
So awesome.
doing something like that. And then I'm actually teaching at QuickBooks Connect a sink or swim session. And Kelly, are you going to be at QuickBooks Connect? Because I'd love if you came to the session.
Okay.
At 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Because this has been the most nightmare thing of my entire life, is trying to prepare for this integration between software.
Oh, let's do it. I got you. No problem.
All right.
She's the queen.
Yeah. But anyway,
I will say that I have to agree, working with vendors has benefited me in several ways. I mean, yes, working with them, promoting a product, whatever that looks like, but also then going back and saying, hey, this doesn't do the right thing, or, you know, this doesn't look right in QuickBooks, or this should be a sales receipt instead of an invoice. This is where this should show up. And I say it all the time that apps that I've come across, the majority of them want to hear from accountants. A lot of accountants think that you have to be in some kind of like speaker or trainer position, or you have to have some kind of title. They want to know what it is that you need for this to work for them. And so reaching out to them and saying, hey, I specialize in, you know, property management, and your software doesn't do this thing, and so I can't use it for QuickBooks, but I like all the other things. They do need that feedback.
Yeah.
So I always say reach out to them, because the majority of them are open to feedback. They're open to making changes. And especially when they're first starting or they're small, you can have a real influence on what that product looks like for everyone else, which is a big thing.
I mean, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, accountants and bookkeepers are the translators between sort of the tech and the data and the real boots on the ground industry. And so why wouldn't an app want to hear, or why couldn't they better hear what's necessary from a person or an office, a firm that is already doing that translating and is trying to use their app to help them do that? It's like the perfect sort of feedback.
Dan, do you have any specific tech that you guys use? I mean, aside from QuickBooks?
I have a tendency, there are so many apps that say that they integrate with QuickBooks. I have a tendency to act as, sit in as a liaison, because the client themselves will go out and choose. And lots of times I'll sit in as a liaison and say, okay, over here in this app, we have this information available, but over here we have QuickBooks, and somehow we have to get those things to talk to each other and get the right fields filled in, and or I'll provide feedback within that conference call that, you know, you guys, you really need this description to show up over here, because right now it's not showing up right. You know, so, you know, sometimes they make the changes, sometimes they don't, but yeah, that overlap between QuickBooks and outside apps. And initially I thought, oh, I could just specialize in one, but clients choose from so many different ones. It's tough to just say, I'm only going to work inside this one app and become an expert in it.
You know, that's why there's so much room for so many people, even to be in the same niche. Or actually at time, we could talk about this forever. Please, if you're interested, go to Gregg's session. Gregg, it's in an hour. Is that correct?
Is it? I think it's at 1 o'clock. I'm not
What
sure.
is that, EST?
1:30. 2 hours.
1:30.
2 hours.
2
2
hours.
hours.
In 2 hours, Gregg is going to be giving you more tips, but also download the deck, connect with the people on this panel.
If you see us
and
at
ask all the
QuickBooks Connect,
questions.
ask all the questions. I always say that. Ask all the questions. If you see
all
me
the
in real life, do not hesitate. And Gregg, we will figure out how to get
Yeah.
you syncing.
Well, Kelly, I want you there. I want you
Okay,
there.
I'm gonna see if it's at the same time as Kristen's. I'm sorry, I have to.
No, it's not. I don't think.
In that case, I will probably be able to make it.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, Gary. And thanks everyone for listening, and happy niching. Happy niching.
All right. Well, thanks to the speakers. Thanks for everybody who showed up and spent an hour with us today. And I did just want to call out in the next week or so, plus or minus a few days, we will be launching the nominations for our top 100 Pro Advisor program. So keep an eye out for that in your favorite social media, on the website, as well as in the newsletters. Excuse me. If you're going to QB Connect, look us up. We'll be out there. See y'all next week. Thank you.